It was 5:30 a.m. The early morning began to break through the lingering night. There was complete silence. Not even the birds had awakened. Silently stepping on the carpet, she made her way to the master bedroom. In the darkness of the morning, she could see the two sleeping figures. Anger washed over her as she watched the carefree couple. Her world had fallen apart, and she blamed them. They would face the consequences. Elizabeth Ann Biseglia was born on November 7, 1947 in Eastchester, a suburb near New York City. She grew up in a strict Irish-Italian family with traditional Catholic values, and her parents instilled in her the importance of attending Catholic schools, finding a Catholic husband, supporting him, and hoping for grandchildren in the future. Betty, as she was known, graduated from Eastchester High School in 1965, and following that, she pursued a degree in early childhood education at the College of Mount St. Vincent in New York City. During her freshman year, she met Daniel Thomas Broderick, an Irish Catholic pre-med student at the University of Notre Dame. Daniel perfectly fit Betty's fairy tale expectations, and after 3 years of dating, the two married on April 12, 1969. During that period, Dan completed his medical degree at Cornell University and immediately enrolled at Harvard Law School with the aim of becoming a medical malpractice lawyer. Meanwhile, Betty was juggling the responsibilities of raising their children, while also working to cover the household expenses. With Dan fully occupied with his studies, Betty took on the role of the primary breadwinner. When Dan successfully obtained his law degree, he received a job offer from a well-respected law firm in San Diego. This prompted the family to relocate to the opposite coast and begin a new chapter in their lives. Their move brought newfound wealth, allowing Betty to quit her jobs and focus on raising their 3 children. In 1978, Dan established his own law firm, which quickly achieved remarkable success. By 1983, the Brodericks had amassed substantial wealth and settled in the affluent La Jolla suburb of San Diego. They enjoyed fancy cars and extravagant holidays, and they seemed absolutely perfect. Betty felt immense pride in being the wife of San Diego's leading medical malpractice attorney, and their shared accomplishments filled her with a radiant sense of satisfaction. After all, she believed that without her unwavering support, Dan would not have reached such heights. However, Betty's fairy tale was on the verge of crumbling. Linda, a young and beautiful legal assistant, caught Daniel's eye. By October 1983, Betty began to suspect Daniel's affair, noticing his late nights, private phone calls, and Linda's frequent presence. Despite this, she was determined to salvage their marriage, attributing Daniel's behavior to a midlife crisis. Betty took proactive steps such as losing weight, undergoing plastic surgery, refreshing her wardrobe, and trying new hairstyles. She addressed every criticism Daniel had voiced, and was determined not to let a mere affair disrupt the life she had painstakingly built. On Daniel's 39th birthday, Betty planned to surprise him at his office with flowers and champagne. However, to her dismay, Dan and Linda were nowhere to be found. The receptionist informed her that the two had left for a birthday lunch and had not yet returned. Betty felt her entire 14-year life with Daniel flash before her eyes. Consumed by anger, she went home and burned all of Dan's expensive suits on the grill. In February 1985, Dan packed his belongings and left the house, leaving Betty and their children behind. Throughout the period when he denied having an affair, he was secretly preparing to end his relationship with Betty. He had fallen in love with Linda and wanted a divorce. Filled with frustration, Betty made a series of mistakes that eventually led to her downfall. One day, she unexpectedly took her eldest daughter to Dan's new residence and left her there without prior notice. Unfortunately, Dan was absent at the time, leaving the daughter stranded on the front doorstep with no means of entering the house. Betty repeated this action with the other children over the following weeks, and when the divorce proceedings began in September 1985, Dan used these incidents as evidence of child abandonment. As a result, he was granted sole custody of the children. Betty's actions led to the heartbreaking loss of her children, compounding the difficulties she was already facing. In January 1986, Dan bought a new house for Linda and his children. At the same time, he sold Betty's house, the house that she had helped build alongside him and their children. Shockingly, he did not provide Betty with any share of the proceeds from the sale. Although the marriage had unraveled, the question arose whether Betty deserved some form of compensation, given her support to her husband while he pursued his career. The legal battle continued for an additional 3 years, finally reaching a conclusion on January 30, 1989. Unfortunately, the terms of the divorce predominantly favored Dan. Betty's plea for $300,000 in annual alimony was rejected, and she also lost custody of her children. 3 months later, Dan and Linda exchanged vows and began their married life together. Driven by her unwavering determination, Betty bought a gun from a sporting equipment store. On November 5, 1989, 7 months after Daniel and Linda's wedding, she entered their home at 5:30 in the morning using her daughter's house key. She silently went to the master bedroom where Daniel and Linda slept peacefully and fatally shot both of them. That same night, Betty surrendered herself to the police. A year later, in October 1990, the trial for the murders of Dan and Linda commenced. Betty's defense claimed she was a battered wife subjected to physical, emotional, and psychological abuse by Daniel, and they argued for a manslaughter charge. However, the state argued that Betty's decision to bring a gun to Dan's house showed premeditation, thereby charging her with first-degree murder. In her defense, Betty claimed that she aimed to show the consequences of their actions by ending her own life in front of them. But when Linda startled her by unexpectedly waking up, she redirected her aim and began shooting at the couple. In December 1991, the jury found Betty guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder. As a result, the judge sentenced her to the maximum term of 32 years to life in prison. She was denied parole in November 2011 and January 2017, and she will not be considered for parole again until 2032.